Okay, recording now.
Hey, Emmett Armstrong. It's good to have you here.
Hey, Tim Thompson. Thanks for having me back.
It's good to have you back. I don't think people might not know how far back you and I go in our history, because you've been gone for how many years now? 4 years?
4 years? I think 4.
Yeah. You just add whatever you have to add certain years to your oldest kid's age, whatever that is, because you had kids after you left. So
right.
We'll just give it one more minute just as people kind of just start hitting those reminders on their calendar or whatever. So we'll kind of play that.
Okay.
But we kind of hinted at it a little bit. Just you obviously were at RevThink really kind of in the early days. I want to say that you sat with Jason while Jason had that door desk on the pedestals.
We had one for each of us. It was a door, 2 filing cabinets, and then a piece of glass. And we had 2 of them.
Yeah. That's how, like early RevThink days, that's how we did it around there.
That's right. Fun. And then 50% was in a coffee shop.
Since you're the host, you have to, why don't you spotlight the 2 of us so that the recording catches that on, and we'll get started doing this.
How's that?
Hey there, it's good to be with you all today. I'm Tim Thompson in this weird shadowy room that I'm in. And if you don't know Emmett, this is Emmett Armstrong. Joel is actually a fly on the wall today. He's traveling and we've heard the Uber's GPS in the background. So we asked him to not participate so we don't have to listen to compete with Siri in the background. But it's good to be with you today. Today's going to be a special day. We're going to talk about NFTs. Emmett has rejoined RevThink. If you were part of the conversation earlier, Emmett was a part of the family many years ago, took a break for a while and recently come back. Specifically, Emmett's recognition and experience in the crypto space is what kind of inspired this being reunited and doing some RevThinking together. And then today we're going to talk specifically about the NFT space and what's changing, what opportunities are happening. The word NFT is used way too often to mean way too many different things. So kind of add some clarity there and understanding. But before we get started, I just want you to know that we exist so that you can thrive in business, life, and career. And the conversation we're having today hopefully advances that further and gives you some more things to think about and opportunities to take a hold of in the work that you're doing. So Emmett, before I go on too far, welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back. Yeah, I'm glad to be part of RevThink again and on camera. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, huh? I think when we first talk about like, hey, do you want to get on camera? How are we going to do this thing? We recognize that it's really the opportunity and need is more a dialogue to really figure out and understand. I'm heavily involved with a company in the NFT space. You're a great kind of follower and community builder and watching some of the platforms that are moving forward. So today, we'll just talk to each other, kind of have a conversation and probably pursue or process some of the curiosity that you and I have about this space. Maybe we'll learn from each other. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my phone here. The first text that I sent you when I was kind of getting back on board, I said, "Are you working with Beeple?" ? And that was kind of the spark that was like, whoa, I need to get back on with Tim.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mike Winkleman was a creative director at Possible, and Possible is one of my long-term clients. And obviously, last couple of years, Mike or Beeple has been working with Possible, and then obviously February changed a lot of things for Mike. I remember the production meeting right after the Big Christie's sale, where one of the producers was going through the roster of resources, and then they said, Mike Winkleman, well, he's not coming back ever. And that was like, they're like, wow, it's such, like his world just absolutely changed so in such a short order. But yeah, the guys at Possible and Mike started a new company called We Knew, and We Knew is heavily in the NFT space, obviously, and doing their own kind of experience more than just what Beeple's doing in this fine art scene. So it's very exciting to be part of that. And honestly, it's thrust into the center. There's a whirlwind happening in the NFT space, and the Beeple halo is pretty heavy. So
Yep.
there's a lot of work happening and a lot of processing going on, and a
Yeah.
lot of education in a very short time. How about
Yeah, it
you?
was
I know
cool.
that you and I, when we first started talking, you said that you actually been in crypto for 3 or 4 years now, right?
Yeah, I think I looked at my transaction history, and the first Ethereum token I bought was $40, and it's now today it's 4,000 something. So I think it was 2013 was when I first really started paying attention, and I've been in and out since then. But I've always been curious about this kind of thing.
So 2013, that's
Oh, maybe it was
like
2015.
8 years.
I'm horrible with dates. I should never say dates ever. I should just say
But
it's
still,
been a while.
5 years or 7 years is
Yeah.
a major time, because most people didn't even know what an NFT was, or some people don't even know the difference between a Bitcoin and Ethereum when we talk about why it's important, what's there. So let's start at the beginning, maybe. Let's you and I'd like to hear what you think an NFT is, and I'll share what I think an NFT is, and see if we can't put some parameters of what the conversation is and how these might or might not have an impact on the work that the people are listening.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good place to start. So I think it's hard for me to just encapsulate everything into a single word. It's why NFT has a good rap or a bad rap depending on who you talk to. But I always want to make sure people understand this concept of code as law. So the code will run the way that it's supposed to run. No questions asked. It'll do what you tell it to. And it's kind of a roundabout way of saying that you can do a bunch of new things without ever relying on a person. So I don't have to hand Tim my $50 bill and trust that Tim will pass that $50 on to somebody else. I hand it to the computer, and the computer is guaranteed to pass it along. So there's this concept of trust, basically, that we don't have to trust a person, we can trust the code. And based on that concept, we now have what's called smart contracts that are created to do certain things. They're more or less robots that will do what you tell them to do. And one of those applications happens to be what we now call an NFT. And it's basically producing a list of items or tokens that have certain properties, or in some cases can do certain things. And they can be tied to a certain person or to a certain image, which is kind of the concept of the NFT is tied to that JPEG. But so those tokens really, they have a lot of really cool attributes that are connected with the code that goes on under the scene. So it's in some ways it depends on what you're talking about, really, the application.
Yeah, that's a great definition, especially code as law. I think that's what the excitement is about it. It's also where some of like the struggle people have is that it is decentralized. So the burden is always on the individual. So it kind of creates some inequality. The more experienced people, the more advanced computer programmers do have an advantage right now over somebody, because there's no banking system. There's no one helping you opening a checking account in Bitcoin. You have to learn it yourself, get involved, and make it happen. But on the other side of it, you can imagine, we'll just say like in the entertainment space, it's kind of a well-known idea that if you were to make a piece of content with a network or TV show, they would say, well, we'll give you a piece of the profit after all the expenses. And then those expenses seem fungible, right? What I include or not include, it kind of has some how good your contract is. In the crypto space or the NFT space, you can clarify that as much as possible. And then upon execution of a transaction, everyone gets paid based on what that contract has. So there's no interpretation outside of the original coding that's in place. And that allows for now ownership of certain products and certain ideas, and to make royalties, which is specifically in motion design, that has never been possible. Folks that are in the audio space, that's been possible, sometimes hard to collect. And really the technology is really wanky. Sometimes in the original days, people would just listen to the radio and write down the songs that they heard, and we were getting paid royalties off of 15-minute block of songs that they're listening to. So obviously that's advanced a bit more with online platforms, but in in a code is law space, you can program more of that in there. So that's the excitement piece. That's the what's amazing. I think what's in our experience recently, the confusion is that people are confusing a JPEG with an NFT. So a lot of people that can make really gorgeous digital art and think that all it is about is like making 100 really pretty images, and then you put it up there in the crypto, platform marketplace, and someone's just going to start gobbling it up.
Right.
And I think that lack of understanding of what this transaction is really about, and that an NFT wraps that JPEG, but the JPEG itself is not an NFT, is a great place to start of like what the opportunity is and how this thing really works.
Yeah. I think the concept that it's the additional layer that enables a bunch of different functionality. That's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So, from your point of view, the opportunities that we're seeing, why don't you just explain what's happening in the current marketplace that is creating a little bit of a frenzy? How would you explain that?
Yeah, I wrote a post about this in the Rev community. Ryan Summers made a question and post about NFTs, and I broke it out into two different categories. The first is basically just artwork, and it's kind of that concept that you talked about, that there's a really pretty piece of art that someone wants to buy, and it's either really pretty or it's for Beeple, it's because he's Beeple and they make art, so there's kind of a value there that's subjective and it's inherent, and it's all those things that we already know about art. So that's the first category. The second category is really more about like the promise or the future that comes along with that. I'm going to use the word piece, but really it's with the token, the NFT, that it could do certain things. So maybe it could give you access to a community. Maybe it could unlock access to an event in person, or a special Discord server, or all these things. And it's utility, what's known as utility. And we have certain things that people are doing right now, and then there's future things that no one's even thought of yet that might be possible with these tokens. So I guess the first category is art, second category would be utility or future promises.
Yeah, so one thing that we're seeing right in the space that we're in is that the truly off of people's recognition, people believe that there's an opportunity to collect. So you can imagine trying to collect digital art like people collect Van Goghs and Picassos and whatever, recognizing that there's a long-term value proposition that in time it'll grow. And there are major influencers in that space that are doing things like getting NFTs into Christie's to be sold as an art, just like a Banksy. And when I went to Christie's in New York City, I saw Beeple's NFT that the latest one he sold, it was right next to a Banksy. So you can kind of get like, it's in the art scene that way. And people working to create some influence to get those into museums, so that there's one person's agenda is to get NFTs into every major museum in the world in the next year. So there's people out there trying to say there are digital artists and the art they have is amazing, and we should recognize that digital art. If you talk to your mom or someone common, their confusion is why would I buy that when I can just download it and have it on my phone? And the example I've been using is, you probably know what the Mona Lisa looks like. Like everybody can identify the Mona Lisa, and we probably even have copies of it on our computer, on our phone, or in our house, or we've always seen copies of it, but there really is only one Mona Lisa. So the ability to replicate it actually is what changed the value of a piece of art in some cases. And that replication value is what becomes pop art, right? And it actually is a mid 1900s kind of movement that created mass replication, and that replication was the art. That's why Andy Warhol became famous, because he was replicating something, not making something unique. So that pop art scene has played itself out in such strange ways. To a few years ago at Art Basel, someone tapes a banana with duct tape to a wall and called that art.
Right.
To recognize that the question there is, can you replicate that? Because it actually just fades away the minute you have there. So there was been an exchange there. And that's some of the opportunity and mindset that allows for this kind of digital art to be valuable, unique, and specifically of our time, much like other major art movements have taken place over the generations and over history. So that's some of the excitement too, and specifically. And I think if you're in the fine art space and you understand that, that's a really easy way to convert. And I think Winkleman knows that part, and his latest piece, Human One, it was so absolutely on track to recognize it's not about digital, it's about making something that's perpetual. And the fact that there is an NFT contract around it gives the artist the right to keep on generating art in that space and work alongside the collector. That's kind of the exciting part. So specifically, that's one area that, as you point out, people are working in and seeing NFTs. What's another example of how people are working with NFTs?
Well, we could talk about brands. I think that's kind of an area that might be interesting to our current audience is the clients, the brands. So today, for example, Pepsi just announced they're doing 1,832 Pepsi NFTs because they started in 1832. Whatever the date is, they're doing that many NFTs, and they're microphones, like Elvis mic or whatever it's called. And they'll have different attributes like a Santa hat, or they'll be gold plated or whatever. And so those don't have any inherent artistic value. They're not produced by the greatest artists of our time. They're just digital art. So from your perspective, why would a brand do something like that? Like, what is the strategy behind a brand creating something like that?
Yeah, so if you move out of something like the fine art strategy, which is also possible, and it can be confusing to recognize because an NFT is an NFT when it comes down to it. In the brand space, in making a project like that, we're going to call a project like that a PFP project, which just stands for profile picture. And that's one of the common executions nowadays, right? Of like the Bored Ape or the CryptoPunks really are 10,000 unique images, and people are owning them and recognizing that. And brands kind of are leaning towards that space to say, maybe we can make some unique qualifiers that people would find interest and recognize and attach to those images. That really is just brands connecting with their users, which is, we all know that that's what happens in the advertising space, right? When we're watching a commercial for Pepsi and there's a musical artist in there, Pepsi's trying to connect with their followers, their drinkers. They're trying to create that identity to say, you're a Pepsi drinker, and you identify with the pop stars that they hire. They're doing the same thing. They're just using JPEGs in a PFP type strategy to connect with those fans. So you're right, they might or might not be a major collector's piece in the future. But if you ask me, I'm always surprised when I go to an antique store and someone has collected 20,000 pieces of Coca-Cola memorabilia, and then they pass away and their family just dumps it into an antique store. But there are obviously people that believe there's an intrinsic value or identity value when buying all those items and putting around their house.
Right.
That to me, I think what's key is if that's the space you want to live in this space, is that our responsibility on this side of the equation is that we need to bring the strategy. We need to understand what the opportunity is, what the need is, and how to connect those brands to their people. Well, we recently did the Playboy Rabbitars, where they did 11,953, because they started in 1953, different images, unique images for their fans. And they clearly, in the Playboy space, there are people that identify with that brand. So they sold out very quickly. It was a large cash grab for that at that time. But to the point that you're saying, Playboy understands that they're actually going for utility and saying, we're going to allow our collectors other rights, other usage rights to parts of their brand and places that they have and work that they're doing, that unless you're holding that token, you don't have that right to it. So that really becomes like a membership opportunity. And some brands are elevating themselves to recognize how membership works and what the member opportunities are. And we were able to work with them to discuss that strategy and play that same out. But there's a lot more responsibility if you're going to get into that membership engagement and long-term play, because there are other platforms like Discord and Twitter that you have to keep up with those fans if you're going to do it and do it well.
Right. And it goes back to what I said earlier about future promises. So they've laid out a roadmap of the story that they're going to tell, the things that they have in store for their token holders. And in this case, those promises are really what people are purchasing, or they're buying it in hopes that it will go up. Everything's going to go up and to the right. So you want to buy something that has a future and a promise, because if you buy a token and the brand just abandons it, then nobody cares and you wasted your money.
Yeah, and that's like another place. So where we knew is right now, what they're exploring is kind of along those lines, that there are PFP projects out there. Like I said, Bored Ape, Cyberpunks, World of Women, those bigger kind of PFP, more popular projects. Those projects also need utility. And some of those contracts wrapped in those NFTs allow for the user to do something with it called derivatives. So if you own a Bored Ape, what makes it unique is that you can go now make a pair of shoes with your Bored Ape on it. And some basketball players are doing that. If you're following it, there are Seth Curry and other players are out there. They own these items and now are replicating them. I think Jimmy Fallon was the latest kind of big celebrity that bought one of these items. Reese Witherspoon bought World of Women PFP project. And so that identity and that image that she owns become hand in hand, and she has the rights to replicate and do that.
Right.
In the We Knew space, we recognize that. And so we thought it'd be great to create additional utility more than the originators of the PFPs are doing. So we create a project where there are derivatives you can create and mint off of your PFP that is not coming from the parent company that generated the original ones. And that began for them truly a kind of a new story and a new identity of what's possible in that space, and what thrust them. Once again, people gave them the first hit, and then Mike Figge, who's now kind of running and being the creative direction there, he's doing something very different and pushing that utility forward. And so in that case, what's interesting is that the art project can become a partner with you or client for you, or a part of your strategy when you're working with other people in that space. And if you're interested in being in that space, that's another place you can kind of join hands, is that utility space for any of these projects.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's lots of opportunity. But what do we need to know? And what are we as RevThink, what's our responsibility to our community?
Yeah, I think I was going to ask you that same question too, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, what you and I both know is, like, if you don't have a wallet, you don't know anything at all. Because
Right.
just to walk through a decentralized process that is so like tricky, almost tricky feeling, because you are holding your own bank account. There is no one else that could help you. No one else can recover it for you. You can be easily passed on to somebody. There's no way of collecting
Right.
it. There's no
Could be
insurance
stolen.
available in this space. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of education just to get started. And I've heard way too many people making assumptions. It's just so easy. They go like, oh, I'll just start this and 100,000 people will be blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's probably 30,000 people total that are doing it. So your 100,000 person audience doesn't even exist yet. The analogy I've been using is the NFTs are to Web3 what HTML is to Web 1 or Web 2, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So I've been saying, this is the internet without the web browser. And just the ability now to make an NFT is similar to creating HTML so you can make a web page. And just like web pages eventually went from just images and portfolios to eventually a place of commerce, Web3 is going to be able to go that way, because NFTs are allowing for that contractual obligation and that marketplace to start up. But think about the internet before a web browser, let alone
Right.
a search engine or
Facebook,
Amazon
which
or
controls
social
our
media.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You
Yeah.
can go shop on Amazon and play on Facebook all day, and you live your life in those two platforms.
But it's also an economy before the Federal Reserve. Like, you're also playing with some of that kind of thinking, or early days of some kind of overall economic control over an economy with a few people in control of it. And that's where like Ethereum or Bitcoin or Dogecoin or the other platforms are doing, like you have to ask the question, who is actually the governance of this economy, these tokens and these coins, and does that governance have longevity? Is it the Federal Reserve, or is this just, the federal, the Confederate dollars that, basically become worth nothing if they can't hold on to their own wealth?
Right.
So that's why, don't you feel like sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant to have people jump in too far, because one, to think that you could just make a bunch of commodity and it wins, that doesn't seem to be true. There's a lot of commodity and most of it's not going anywhere. And then the idea that it's a safe place or it's really easy or there's a lot of people there, that's not true either. There's not that many people actually participating in these projects that are spending the money that we'd want to make doing it.
Yeah, I see a comment from Ryan Summers that there are already tools for generating your own profile picture project. And I think it reminds me of, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's like irresponsible creation. Like you're creating something that's not going to be useful or good for people if you're not approaching it with the right strategy. And that's kind of what you're saying, is like, that's why RevThink isn't just preaching this gospel to everybody, because it's a little bit of a scary world. There's a lot of new things going on, a lot of bad actors, a lot of ways to lose a lot of money. So we want to encourage curiosity for sure, and we are definitely going to be part of this conversation. And that's a lot of that is actually why I'm back here at RevThink, is because I want to be part of that. But at the same time, we want people to be well informed and to do their own research as well.
Absolutely. And it's part of your personal journey too. It's we can coach and we can advise and we can give you insights and definitely exchange what we see in the marketplace. So all that's very valuable. And I think this conversation needs to continue, because it seems like every 3 weeks something new pops up to talk about. But another analogy I keep using of, like, in the gold rush, what position do you think best suits you? Like, should you be a gold miner, or should you be the one selling the shovels? Should you be Levi Strauss, who made a product that continues way beyond just the 49er gold rush that was created then? Do you build the railroads because now that you have these boom towns, later on there's opportunity to move things back and forth? That's all the opportunity we're seeing. And you have to know who you are and what your ability to strategize in the long term to understand, am I a collector of these items? And therefore I'm a Guggenheim on the other side of this equation after 25 years. And if you know the 4 stages of the creative career, you know that last stage is influence. And what excites me most about the NFT space and why I'm leaning into it most is that we finally have an actual presence in that 4th quadrant of the 4 stages, which is the collector space. And that the key element there is not your art ability or business ability or even community ability, it's influence. And that's when Beeple hit, he became influential. And that's why it's working for him. So you have to understand your influence strategy. And I don't mean influencer strategy, like, how famous you are on TikTok or whatever. I mean the understanding of the collection of knowledge and people and experiences that you have now and have into the future, how you leverage that collection of people to give back, build up, grow an economy, create wealth for yourself, for others, make other people happy and successful first. Those kind of principles we talked about in that 4th stage. This is one that's hit our marketplace, that in an early stage that we can live that out. So for many of us who've been doing this for years, there's finally a tool that we can talk about that.
Right. Yeah. And we want to encourage our community here to have that mindset, because I've done some web design and stuff in the past. And when a client comes to me and they have a really crappy strategy and they just want me to execute and push these pixels, I want to be in a place where I could say, actually my recommendation is something else, something better. And we want our community here at RevThink to be able to say, hey, I know that you want me to do 10,000 turtles or whatever, but I actually have a better approach, because as a RevThink community, we're ahead of this and we're talking about it, and we're talking about the collector aspect, the ethical aspect, the strategy aspect.
Yeah, and those of you who've been listening to our Hollywood Breaks podcast, you also know that there's such a great opportunity in the entertainment space. So the thing that you might have fallen in love with that got you leaning into the job you're doing now, there's now a new form, a new way of entertaining and growing. So you might actually be able to fulfill your own promises on a brand new platform if you're ready to lean in and build this thing up. So this can be, you can imagine the early studio makers. This is the opportunity they had where technology advance allowed them to make a movie studio, or even just the ability to tell stories in a unique way that before weren't always connected, and now we can connect one place to the other. So you can actually keep it in the niche that you live in and still be very happy, successful, and thriving if you understand the opportunities. So well said, of just, there is so many different ways of processing that. And I think you and I are, when Joel and I talk a lot, we talk about the 7 ingredients, and those are key elements inside of running a successful creative business. And those won't go away. But I think when you and I talk, we're talking about the 4 stages of the creative career, where there are greater things that you have to build up over your career. And there's a moment here that you can liken that to. So we're gonna have 2 paradigms inside of RevThinker for a little bit to like lean into one or the other, or combine the 2 of them, make it happen. So it's great to have you here and focus on that with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. Not to mention, you're just a cool guy, and we just have to have, cool people around us all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Well, what can I say? So I learned everything I know from Tim, so.
That's also why.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Well, what can people do to learn more?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So let's do something together. So inside of the Rev community space, if we haven't already done it, I know we talked about it earlier. Let's create a channel so that we can start a channel just about these questions that we have and some of the processing that's out there. I think the building up of a community is really important right now in the space, so we can learn from one another. If you're not on Discord having conversations with people in the NFT space, you probably should do that and start getting onto those servers. It's not hard to find those communities. If you follow one of the major PFP projects, you can log onto they show you how to log onto their Discord server, and you can be part of that. And those are very open communities. They share a lot. You can ask very basic questions, and there's always someone willing to share and give you an answer. But inside a Rev
anyone that messages you privately on one of those Discord servers is a scam.
It's a scam.
It's a scam, 100%.
Yeah. Don't ever give out your wallet address to anyone unless you know what you're doing. The other thing we should, inside of RevThinker, try to advance those basics even more. So something more industry specific, talk about some strategies, opportunities. And I would love to share what I'm learning, how that grows. And there's so many different strategies I'm seeing play out that not one company can do all of it, that there's probably opportunities with people right now. We want people to understand that, take advantage of, process that. So we'll start that in Rev Community, sign up, log in, and go to that channel if you're interested. And Emmett, we're going to leave it up to you. You're the one responsible for keeping that channel going. So this is why you're here. So you be that personality and be the question and answer man for all that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, the channel is created. I am in the Rev community. I'm also on Twitter, and I'm here at RevThink now. So you can't get rid of me, Tim. Not that easy.
No, hopefully not. Hopefully not. Well, thank you all for being part of this. I know that we only touched on such a small piece of it, but hopefully there are some things we said that helped advance your thoughts. And you can always DM us, ask us questions directly. We're happy to jump on a call with you if you want to process more. If you guys are going through something, have an opportunity for a client you want to take advantage of, you should reach out to one of us and we can kind of process with you and figure out what works best. And by the way, should we just make a quick announcement that our last weekly briefing of the year is going to be next week, and Joel is going to conclude the goal-making process. If you are one of our clients, you should have gotten a direct invitation to be one of our workshops and make those 2022 goals with us. We can lock in your factors and keep things going. And if you don't know what I'm saying at all, you're probably not one of our clients, but you can still listen to the weekly briefing and be part of that process. So happy to have you on board. Emmett, thanks for hosting this today and making it happen. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for being part of this.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
No, of course. Later.